Welcome to Running on Ice, the coolest community in freight. I'm your host, Mary O'Connell, bringing you the latest tech updates, warehouse news, and everything happening in the cold chain world. Not only is there the coolest show in freight, but there's also Running on Ice, the newsletter that could not be colder. You can subscribe to that on freightwaves.com/runningonIce. Today, we welcome one of my favorite people to annoy on a daily basis, or just talk to on a daily basis, and that is none other than our FreightWaves deputy editor, Brielle Jagle, host of Tracks Through Time. Welcome to Running on Ice, Brielle.
Hi.
I'm very excited for today because we're going to do something a little different today, and we're going to kind of turn some tables on it because so I frequently appear on Brielle's show Tracks Through Time, and she tells me history stories, and sometimes I tell her them, but we're going to tell the history of cold chain. But before we get too far into that, let's get some background on you, Brielle, and how you ended up here how you ended up hosting a history of supply chain show.
Oh, geez. Well, we can go back to college. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, basically, I've been in B2B since I graduated, and I've been in supply chain news since, forgive my voice, it's that time of year, you know. I've been in supply chain news for about 3-4 years now. And I also happen to love history, and I basically we needed to fill a spot in our FreightWaves classics department, and I immediately was like, I'll do it. So I cover all of our history stuff for our classics column, and then I was able to spin that into a podcast, and it's just a lot of fun. I love learning about all this fun stuff. I mean, you know, you talk to somebody outside of logistics and they think, oh, history and logistics, they don't get it. But then I'm like, well, I covered all these interesting stories that are related to logistics, and you know, I think it's awesome.
I think it's awesome too, because everybody's just like, oh, so you guys cover like the history of trains and trucks, and you're like, yeah, but there's a lot more to it. It's honestly one of my favorite things. If you guys have not checked out that show, 100% go over and check it out. It just becomes, I like to think it gets a little more unhinged each week as we come up with new things to talk about.
I think it's just getting unhinged as we get closer to the end of the year. I'm gonna reel it back in January, but I will say a funny story. I have a couple of friends, one in particular, my friend's husband thought that I was just really into trains, like on my own, like that it wasn't part of my career, because I have like a TikTok and I have social media like devoted to history in logistics, and the opening of Tracks Through Time is that train. And so he must have seen the opening, and he's just like insisting on telling his wife, who is one of my good friends, that like, no, Brielle's like super into trains. And she's like, no, it's for work. I'm like, I am, but like, yes, it's for work. Like, I'm not just posting on my personal Instagram about trains all day long.
All right, so enough about trains. We're moving into the history of cold chain, because it is historical and supply chain. And honestly, I still want to know how they were able, we don't cover it here, but maybe someday I'll find some historian who knows the answer to this. I still want to know how, like, in the early 1900s, those like horse and carriages full of like blocks of ice, I still want to know how they were able to like be transported and not have like the ice melt and stick together, because like that was a thing here in St. Louis in the early 1900s, and like, you know, it's humid and hot here in the summer. So I would love to know how they were able to transport ice like that, because yeah, it's not like you could keep the unit cold because it was like just a horse and a buggy. So
we will be visiting that for either classics or Tracks Through Time in the coming year, because I have that tabbed. I have a whole research going on that.
Alrighty, well, let's take a trip back to yesteryear, and probably around the 19th century. That's how far back we're going. Kind of what we know, what cold chain is today, was started back as British fishermen created new ways to ship seafood during the first half of the 19th century, so like the early 1800s. Ice was used to keep food cool during transport, which is very nice that fish aren't rotting on boats as they come across, because who wants rotted fish? Not me. Additionally, fishing boats use large quantity of ice to keep their catch fresh. Again, we love fresh fish, love it. The ice was obtained by they cut it from frozen lakes in Maine, Canada, or Scandinavia, and then by 1890, the trade in ice reached its peak with more than 500 ships employed, mostly powered by sail. So like there were like massive sailboats just like transporting ice and boats of fresh fish on ice, which I think is pretty cool. So then meanwhile so that was kind of through the early 1800s, and then in 1879 the British had a cold air machine aboard two ships. I will probably be butchering their names, the Circassia and the Strathleven. These three-masted sailing ships. Oh, and then there was a three-masted sailing ship, Dundon, in 1882 that transported the first shipment of frozen meat from New Zealand to England. I don't know how long that was, but that feels like a very long thing to take on a boat. So these early reefer ships were insulated by flaked charcoal silicate, cotton pumice, cow hair, or later granulated cork to ease the work of the cold air machines. And the first effective cold store in the UK opened in 1882 at St. Catherine's Dock. It could hold 59,000 carcasses, and by 1911, its cold storage capacity in London had reached 2.84 million carcasses. So quite a jump up in carcasses.
What year was this?
This was 1882. No, in 1911 they reached 2.84 million carcasses, and then in 1882 they had 59,000 carcasses.
It's crazy how they can handle that much without modern technology. It just always blows my mind.
Right? Because this was all like very manual, and I'm just very curious. I would love to see like how they stored it. Was it just like on hooks? Was it laid flat? Like what are we working with here? So then, so they developed reefer ships. And so these reefer refrigerated ships, they were generally thought of like a single entity. They tend to come in two distinct types. First is a dedicated frozen meat, and the second one is fruit. Like there was a refrigerated fruit ship, which primarily did bananas. So like the Chiquita, like the Chiquita banana song, that came from the ships of the banana refrigerated ships. Yeah. So, um, then it wasn't until 1930 that the modern version of cold chain came about. The term cold chain was first used in 1908, and then by about 1930, about 1,000 refrigerated meat containers were in use, which could be switched from the road to the railway. So kind of those containers that we know and think about today when we think of cold chain, those came around in 1930, and they could just go right onto the road, which honestly, I do love. I do love that, because I feel like it would be a giant waste of time to have to like unload it into a rail car or something like that. So mobile mechanical refrigeration was invented, actually. So like kind of the reefer units that we know today was invented by Frederick McKinley Jones. Jones' technological breakthrough redefined the global marketplace from the world's largest cities to the most isolated villages. Consumers and distributors now had year-round access to products such as meat, dairy, frozen foods, fresh produce, etc., etc. Temperature-sensitive goods such as live poultry could safely be transported now. So basically, it was able to open up a whole new world of things, and you could get blueberries in the fall and other times where it wasn't very seasonal. So advancements in these containerization options soon translated the technology to boxcars, so the things that are on the rail. Then it became standard refrigerated containers that could be moved from truck to ship to plane to rail without needing to unload and reload contents. Basically, he essentially founded and created the modern transportation refrigerated industry as we know it. So much props to Frederick McKinley Jones, MVP man. We love him. So probably now when you think of like a reefer unit, you think of more often than not Thermo King. Well, In a surprise to no one, Jones co founded Thermo King with another entrepreneur, Joseph A. Joe Numero. In 1938, Numero sold Cinema Supplies, which was a movie sound equipment business, to RCA to form the new entity, U.S. Thermo Control Company, later rebranded Thermo King Corporation, as we know and love them today. In partnership with Jones, his engineer, Numero was hired or like partnered with Jones. Jones was the engineer, Numero was the business guy. Jones designed a portable air cooling unit for trucks carrying perishable foods, and they got a patent for it on July 12th of 1940. And then there was a challenge to the patent to or no, there wasn't a challenge to the patent. They got the patent in response to a challenge to invent a refrigerated truck over a 1937 golf game by associates of Numero. So basically, the guys who were the president of Werner Transportation at the time and United States Air Conditioning Co. They were playing golf with Numero, and they were like, "Bet you can't make a refrigerated truck." And he said, "Bet, let's go." So I love that so many of the things that we use today were essentially created on a golf course.
Golf course, on a dare, on a let's see if I can do it, or by accident. Those are my favorite inventions.
Absolutely. It's kind of that it's just kind of the like let's just mess around and see what happens, you know? Let's just tinker around with it. So, in 1941, when it was World War II, the United States entered the war. The Defense Department actually selected one of the portable refrigeration units designed by Jones as standard equipment for the armed forces. They were dropped by parachute into combat areas to refrigerate food, water, drugs, and blood plasma. As we have learned many times on this show, the biggest thing to help save people on front lines is the ability to get blood to them so they can get stabilized to get to the field hospital. They also cooled the cockpits of B-29 bombers and ambulance planes. They also helped air-conditioned field hospitals to give injured soldiers kind of relief from, being the summer and sweating. And the only thing that sucks more than like being injured and almost dying is being sweaty and injured and almost dying. So now basically this technology had been put into humanity service and being able to help people and kind of start the medical supply chain as we know it now. So, and then in the late 1960s, the container revolution was gaining momentum. Bananas were no longer shipped in the stern but they were shipped in perforated cardboard cartons. So they used to just like throw all the bananas in a boat and say, it's good enough, it'll get there. Now it's in cardboard cartons that hold about 20 hands of bananas. And so the cartons now were started to be stowed in the late 60s in refrigerated containers and put on board these ships that were fitted with electrical outlets and plugs to kind of help have the individual refrigerator units. And then this technology, since moving forward to where we are today, the technology has been in use basically since its inception for you name it. We even had someone on the show ship a In-N-Out burger across the country. So as medical breakthroughs such as cancer treatments, COVID vaccines, other medical supplies, being able to ship produce, et cetera, basically the demand for cold chain has only grown. And then actually in 1991, the National Medal of Technology was awarded to Joseph A. Numero and Frederick M. Jones. President George Bush awarded both of them posthumously to their widows at a ceremony in the White House Rose Garden. Fun fact, Frederick Jones was the first African American to receive the award. So he's a double history maker. We love to see it. We love to see a successful man. And then today, reefer operators are pretty much continuing to try and utilize container ships that have high reefer capacity, not just due to economics, but the growing number of seaports that can no longer accommodate these specialized reefer unit ships. So pretty much now they don't have the specialized reefer ships that, the Chiquita Banana ships or the Banana Man. I don't remember exactly how that song goes. but you know what I mean. So now it's basically just container ships that hold reefer container units, dry van or dry container units, and pretty much if you can put it in a container, it's going to end up on that ship. So that is basically the history of cold chain, Brielle.
It's so interesting. I mean, I just like I said before, I think it's crazy that um thing that the history of this goes so far back beyond before, real modern technology. It's so exciting and interesting.
Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting that like because when I was doing research for it, I was like, okay, well, pretty much before Jones invented the refrigerator or the reefer unit, there wasn't a lot about cold chain other than just like, oh yeah, they stuck ice on it or they did this or they did that. And it's still very like, but like people have been keeping things cold for centuries. So it's kind of like I would love to someday figure out like what ancient Egyptians did or like old society, like ancient societies and cultures, because they had a way of preserving things and keeping things cold. So that's just when you get deeper into that, that's where I kind of go, how did they do it? And it's just the little like nuanced everyday life things like that that really kind of go, whoa, okay. Just because like you said, it was a very manual society and they didn't have all the technology that we have.
Actually, you're in luck because that Tracks Through Time episode or classics article, I'm not sure which one we're going to go with, that's coming up next year is going to cover that.
This is why I just adore you, because you read my mind and want and just kind of already start researching the things that I want to know more about. So I'm very excited for that. Uh, do you have any fun facts for us today?
Well, here, I'll give you a fun fact that's related to that. What we're going to focus on in that episode is the fact that the modern frozen food industry really took inspiration from the Inuits. So that's why I'm going to be able to uncover like how ancient people, I mean, Inuits are still operating today, obviously, but so a lot of the stuff from modern times we took from the ancient world and native people to see how they handle things, and we kind of took that and you know integrated technology into that, and then that's how we made our the food industry of today.
I was gonna say the frozen food industry is something like it's expected to be like a $6 billion industry, $8 billion industry.
It's growing exponentially every year since COVID. I remember when I was working in the frozen and refrigeration 3PLs at my last company. I was writing a report every year. It was like the projections are growing and growing because during COVID people got so used to frozen foods that it stalled after COVID for a little bit, but then it came back.
Oh, it's back with like a vengeance. Like everyone and their brother. Like it's the point where like when I see new stuff come out, I'm like, where's this gonna go in the freezer section? Because frozen pizza already takes up a whole aisle. Like there's a whole aisle of pizza and then a whole aisle of ice cream. So I'm like, where's everything else going?
I mean, since COVID, we've had to get an extra freezer because we were like, well, let's just get like a bunch of meat and like keep it, as long as it's frozen, we're fine.
We did the same thing.
The first time, here's my second fun fact, the first time the term cold chain was ever used was in 1908, and the first effective cold store in the United Kingdom opened in 1882.
I just like how do you even begin to cool something in 1882? If somebody knows, please let us know, because I feel like you would just have to have like, I guess because they didn't really have central air or heating at that point in time either. So I guess, I mean, where there's a will, there's a way. They're gonna figure it out. That feels like that's a lot of ice though.
Oh, I know we've talked about this a lot in Tracks Through Time, but I live in like kind of like we have a lot of history in this area, but it's like lesser known. And we have a long history of cranberry bogs. We kind of are a huge part of the cranberry industry here. And so you can go to like old cranberry bogs and see how they like in the 19th century, how they handle that. And basically it's keeping stuff in dark, cold, underground places. So there's like all these store old, you know, not ruins because it's from the 19th century or like the 18th century, but you can go into these cellars that are old, and how they used to like store like for retail, for business. It's crazy.
It always is impressive, like, because I know there's like a whole thing of salt curing too, and like how you store salt cured meats and other things like that. And I don't know, I'm just very fascinated when you get into like the preservation and other things that happen in history. Um, but do you have one more fun fact for us?
The World Health Organization created a strategy to address critical issues in vaccine distribution, including systems to monitor temperature during transport, lack of storage equipment, and appropriate staff training in 1976. Which that to me seems a little late, but that's fine.
I mean, look, if what was it? If it wasn't until the 60s, let's see. If it, yeah, it wasn't until the 40s till like, a refrigerated van hit the market. And then in the 60s, they were finally kind of gaining momentum in the container ships. I feel like that's about right.
Okay, I'll take it.
Okay, so Brielle, we are running out of time today. Which this is your first time on Tracks Through Time, so we have to get you with the question that we have gotten everybody with.
I'm sorry. What show am I on?
I mean, it's your first time on Running on Ice, and because we don't have ridiculous questions like this on Tracks Through Time, just on Running on Ice and Check Call. So, Brielle, as a first timer, is cereal considered a soup?
And this is why we don't have these ridiculous questions on Tracks Through Time, because Tracks Through Time is my show, and I hate this question. I'm sorry, this is terrible. It's disgusting, first of all, and I'm sick, so all I'm eating is soup. So I hated seeing this on the script today. First of all, it's a moot point. If you want to consider it a soup and be fun, that's your prerogative. You go for it, Mary. You believe that soup.
Well, I don't think cereal is a soup, but we've had some strong arguments.
No, just because it's liquid and chunky. No, I'm sorry. Like, we even call cold soup gazpacho. That even has a separate name for it. You need to cook things. There needs to be broth. Milk is not a broth. Milk does not. I'm sick and can only eat soup. And cereal, no.
I mean, clam chowder is milky broth.
Dude, I love clam chowder. You don't need to talk about it like that. And it's cooked. It's different.
That might be some of the most passionate responses that we've ever gotten, and I love it.
I'm out of here.
All right, so if someone wants to take your soup opinions to task, or if they have any great history things they want you to dive into for them, where can they find you outside the show?
No, please don't come at me saying that cereal is a soup. Good for you. If you want to believe that, that's fine. That's good for you.
So if they just have history they want to learn about,
then you can contact me on Twitter at JakelBrielle. And you can email me at bjakel@freightwaves.com. And if you don't know how to spell it, you can Google it.
You can catch other episodes of Running on Ice right here on YouTube or anywhere else you get your podcasts, like Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Need more Running on Ice news? No sweat. Subscribe to the newsletter on freightwaves.com/runningonIce. See you on the internet.